For 2,000 years, Judas has been the most hated figure in Christian history. The man who betrayed Jesus for 30 pieces of silver, the ultimate symbol of treachery. His name became a word for traitor in dozens of languages. In 1978, a farmer in Egypt found a leather-bound manuscript in a limestone cave. It changed hands on the black market for decades, almost decomposed in a New York freezer, was kept in a Swiss safe deposit box for 16 years, and was finally decoded in 2006. Inside, a document dating to approximately 300 AD, a copy of a much older text, in which Jesus asks Judas to betray him. The Gospel of Judas is a Gnostic text, one of dozens of alternative early Christian writings. Written in Coptic, the language of early Egyptian Christians. The document that was found is a copy dating to roughly 300 AD, but the text it copies is believed to be much older, possibly from the 2nd century AD. Mentioned by the Church Father Irenaeus in 180 AD, who condemned it as heretical, which means the text existed at least as far back as 180 AD, possibly much earlier. What does it say? The basic narrative is a revelation given privately by Jesus to Judas. In this version, Judas is not a villain. He is the most enlightened of the disciples, the only one capable of truly understanding what Jesus taught. And Jesus specifically asks Judas to hand him over to the authorities, not as a betrayal, as a sacred act. Because by doing so, Judas allows Jesus to escape the material world, his physical body, and return to the divine realm he came from. In Gnostic theology, the physical world is a prison. The spirit needs to escape it. Judas, by facilitating the crucifixion, facilitates the liberation. He is not a betrayer. He is the most trusted assistant, the one Jesus trusted with the most important task. In this version of the story, Judas's famous kiss in the garden, the signal to the soldiers, is not a sign of treachery. It is the fulfillment of a sacred agreement between teacher and most trusted student. The most hated figure in Christian history was in this version doing exactly what he was asked. The physical manuscript's journey from cave to scholarship is as remarkable as its contents. Found in 1978 near the Egyptian village of Beni Massa. By a farmer or treasure hunter, the exact circumstances unclear. The manuscript entered the Egyptian antiquities black market, where it was sold and resold multiple times with its significance unrecognized. In 1983, it was brought to the United States by an antiquities dealer. A scholar was shown it and immediately recognized it might be the Gospel of Judas. But the asking price was $3 million. Nobody paid it. The manuscript was then stored in a safety deposit box in Hicksville, New York, for 16 years, then transferred to a freezer in a dealer's home. The cold and humidity caused significant additional damage to the already fragile papyrus. When it finally emerged again in 2000, it was in critical condition. Crumbling, fragmentary, portions lost forever. It was eventually purchased by the Maecenas Foundation in Switzerland and handed to National Geographic for conservation and scholarly analysis. The conservation work alone took years, piecing together thousands of fragments using multispectral imaging, recovering text that had been illegible for decades of mishandling. In 2006, the translation was published, and the world finally learned what the document said. The response was immediate and enormous. The Vatican issued a statement. Theologians published responses, scholars debated, because the implications, if this text represented a genuine early Christian tradition, were profound. Let's be clear about what the Gospel of Judas is and isn't. It is not a newly discovered eyewitness account. It was written roughly 150 years after the events it describes, by a Gnostic community that had specific theological views different from mainstream Christianity. Gnostic communities wrote many such texts, most were excluded from the official biblical canon. The Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Mary, the Gospel of Philip, all Gnostic texts with different perspectives on the same events. The Gospel of Judas is one more alternative version, not necessarily more or less accurate than the canonical accounts, but it tells us something genuinely important about early Christianity. In the first 2 centuries after Jesus, there was not one Christianity, there were many. Different communities with genuinely different accounts of who Jesus was and what he taught, different views on Judas, different views on the crucifixion, different views on salvation. The Christianity that survived and became dominant was one version among several competing ones, and in the communities that held the perspective the Gospel of Judas represents, Judas was not a villain. He was a hero, the trusted one, the enlightened one, the one asked to do the hardest task. Whether that version is historically accurate, we cannot know. But it existed as a genuine belief, held by real people in the first centuries of Christianity, and it survived 1,700 years, hidden in a cave, nearly destroyed multiple times, to finally be read in 2006. A text that rewrites the most famous betrayal in history, found in a cave, nearly destroyed, stored in a freezer, ignored for decades. Finally read. 2,000 years after the events it describes, in which Judas was not a villain. He was asked, "If you want more history that rewrites what you thought you knew, subscribe. And let me know in the comments, does the Gospel of Judas change how you think about him?"